to Euthyphro. We left off more or less somewhere around 10a1. Let's sort of start at 10a1 and do a little brief overview. 10a1 was a question that Socrates asked of Euthyphro after Euthyphro came up with the third definition, that what all the gods love is pious, and all they hate is impious. He comes up with, is it love of the gods because it's pious, or is it pious because it's love of the gods? I launched into divine command theory and then the logic section of the course, and now we're back to 10a1. And I'm hoping now that you're maybe a little better equipped than Euthyphro was, at least logically, to be able to deal with the differences in this sort of a causal question. Is this cause that, or does that cause this? Certainly Euthyphro is not quite ready for it. And there's a lot of question as to why Socrates is not making himself clearer in these sections of 10b, 10c, on through 10d, and into 11. That whole big paragraph on at 11a and part of 11b. I mean, it seems like Socrates is making it more difficult for himself than he has to. And there are lots of ways we can interpret it. One, that he's having a bad day, or that he is really frustrated with Euthyphro. I think another thing, and this to me seems more plausible, is he's trying to give it to Euthyphro unvarnished. He wants Euthyphro to understand this causal reasoning without having any sort of a crutch, any kind of analogies, any kind of other thing. He is just trying to have, can't you understand this, Euthyphro, that there's a difference between this and that. And Euthyphro seems to be, he's not reluctant, he just doesn't seem to have the horsepower at this point to be able to understand the difference between those kinds of reasoning. And Socrates is trying to make it, he's trying not to make it something that he dumbs it down for Euthyphro. Eventually, he's going to have to dumb it down for Euthyphro, but at this point, he just doesn't seem to want to do that. And that's why I think it is seemingly unnecessarily difficult there between 10 and 11, with him trying to explain that there's a difference between them. Euthyphro is not clear that there's a difference, but I think one of the things that comes up is that as we go through those couple of 3 pages, at one point he'll say, now Euthyphro, is it loved by the gods because it's pious? And Euthyphro will say, yes, yes, that's true. And then a little bit later he'll say, is it pious because it's loved by the gods? And Euthyphro will say, yes, yes. And it's sort of anything that Socrates says, Euthyphro is like a little puppy dog. Yeah, 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 I want to run out. Let's go run, let's go run, let's go run. Or, you know, and you may ask it, hey, you want me to kick your ass? Yeah, 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 yeah. Don't tell me you've never done that to your dog. Of course you have. Hey, you want an ass kicking now? Oh, yeah. Oh, good dog. What's an ass kicking? Oh, okay. Maybe I'm the only cruel and forgive me, why? They won't give me a anymore animal shelter. Well, anyway, the important thing is, because they're so damn delicious, dog hot pot is the delicacy from China, in southeastern China, Guangxi province. Dog hot pot. I mean, see, the gaminess of the dog meat sort of gets extracted by the hot peppers in the hot pot. And
that sounds delicious.
It really is. I mean, the problem with, there's no white meat on dog. That's the problem. I always think, when Thanksgiving comes, well, anyway, let's continue on here because
getting hungry.
One can argue there's far too much white meat in Plato, but you catch my drift. So the problem is that Socrates is trying to get Euthyphro to understand the difference, and Euthyphro not only will not understand the difference, but seems to agree to both things simultaneously. And that is what is sort of driving Socrates to have to eventually change his tack. He mentions it somewhat at 11c, in that little statement there. He says, your statements, Euthyphro, seem to belong to my ancestor Daedalus. Now, Daedalus was a sculptor, probably a mythical sculptor, was a sculptor who supposedly could sculpt human figures so lifelike. The story was that they moved around, they could walk, and they were so lifelike. Anybody ever been to the Nelson and see, they have a museum guard statue there by Dwayne Hansen, great American sculptor Dwayne Hansen. And most of Dwayne Hansen's stuff are that time. And you can, if you go in there sometime, you stand about 20 feet back from the museum guard. You'll find, go on a Saturday, particularly when all the rubes can't come in off their turnip trucks, and they'll go up and say, hey, mister, where do I take a whiz around here? Asking the statue that. So that's like Daedalus. So if you've been to the Nelson and asked the museum guard where to take a whiz, then you'll understand this perfectly. What Socrates is saying is that once we get things nailed down, okay, it's the love of the gods because it's pious. Then a few lines later, you're going to say, it's pious because it's the love of the gods. And your point of view keeps moving around. And Euthyphro is essentially saying, well, your point of view keeps moving around. I can't tell what the hell you're talking about. And so they're having a difficulty understanding the basic terms that Socrates has set up here. Which is it? Is it this because of that, or is that because of this? As a result, Socrates himself has to sort of take over the role that he has more or less expected Euthyphro to carry, which is, give me a definition and we'll work on it. He had done that for the first 3 times. There were 3 definitions that Euthyphro gave, and they worked on it, but they ain't working on this one very well. So they're at 11a4. See whether you think that all that is pious is of necessity just. That's Socrates talking. And he's really proposing something of a new definition. Is everything that's pious also just? So we're bringing justice and piety into the same picture. Well, it's a new definition. It's something new. Justice hasn't been a part of the description or the definition of piety yet. And yet now Socrates is suggesting maybe that's something we can use. Now, he's suggesting it for 2 reasons. It may well be that this will be an important part of piety. But the second thing, he wants to understand, or wants Euthyphro to understand, that the relationship between justice and piety can be made out as something like the relationship between pious and love by the gods. And if he can understand the same relationship, but under different terms, different contexts. Let's talk about justice and piety instead of love by the gods and piety. If he can show this in a different context, but show that the same causal relationship exists, then maybe he'll be able to essentially break this logjam, this mental, intellectual logjam that they are forced to labor behind, because Euthyphro can't understand the difference between those 2 kinds of causal reasoning. So he makes that suggestion, and then he says, I think so. Euthyphro says that. And then just a little before 12, then, is all that is just pious? Or is all that is pious just, but not all that is just pious, but some but not all? And Euthyphro says, oh, there you go again. I don't understand, I don't feel. So apparently Socrates' attempt to be able to use a different illustration to show the same general relationship has fallen apart. So Euthyphro still can't figure it out. And then Socrates finds a way to break through. The last resort of any philosopher, I guess, is poetry. And so he quotes a couple of lines of poetry, and that occurs at a little before 12b. And the 2 lines that he quotes from a poet that seems to have been lost in antiquity. Nobody seems to know who this poet really is. But the lines are, you do not wish to name Zeus who had done it, who had made all things grow, for where there is fear, there is also shame. So those are the lines. And then Socrates says, I don't agree. I don't agree with the poet. Let me tell you why. What he is stating here, or what the poet is stating, is something of the same kind of a relationship as was between justice and piety. Now he says, where there is fear, there is also shame. And while Socrates doesn't do this, I'm going to do this. He is really alluding to the same kind of a relationship that we I illustrated for you with the concentric circles. So let's do it with this. And I think that will help you, and if Euthyphro is here among you, help him understand there is fear, there is shame. That's what the poet holds. Socrates is going to argue the opposite. Shame, there is fear. But he'll explain the difference. And in explaining the difference and explaining why he holds one and rejects the other, He seems to finally break the logjam, seems to finally get through to Euthyphro about the difference. Euthyphro apparently can see the difference between these two, and then if he can take that understanding and move it into other areas, maybe he'll understand the differences that were really more crucial to the question of piety. This has nothing to do with the question of piety, but it has to do with the question of how can I make Euthyphro understand the relationship about piety and either justice or piety and love by the gods that really has sort of bedeviled this dialogue now for quite a while. Here's what he said: where there is fear, there is also shame. And what the poet means is that whenever you have a fear, then it inevitably involves you being ashamed. That all fears involve a certain element of shame. Where there is fear, there is shame. And Socrates says, I don't agree with that. There are certain fears. There certainly are some fears that you have no reason to be ashamed of. You fear premature and violent death, fear the stock market crash, fear of getting a terrible disease. There are a lot of things. There's no shame in those kinds of fears. Doesn't mean that all fears are devoid of shame. But this one says all fear does have shame attached. He says no. We can name any number of fears that are legitimate to have. People should not feel ashamed of fearing certain kinds of things. And so he says, I don't agree with that. The poet, he believes, is wrong on this. But he says, I do believe in the opposite. That where there is shame, there is also fear. And what he means is that if you're ashamed of something, you always fear it being revealed. You always fear what will happen if people find out. That's, shame involves trying to hide it. And the fear is having it exposed. So he says, this, he believes, is a correct relationship. That where there is shame, there is fear, because shame is something you don't want to have revealed, and therefore you fear it being revealed, and you fear for your reputation if it finally is. And so he says, this is why I think the poet is wrong, this is why I think I'm right. And Euthyphro seems to finally understand, that the difference between them. And maybe now he can translate that understanding into an understanding about pious and loved by the gods. We haven't gotten there yet, and we may, who knows if we ever do. But we are going to go back to piety and justice, because that was sort of an attempt, at least, at some sort of a definition, or at the very least, it may be something like a necessary condition, who knows, for the idea of piety. So let's look at the proposal, both of those proposals, because they're at about 11, about 11E going on to 11 to 12A. He sort of is all that is just pious, or is all that is pious just, that kind of thing. So let's look at them and see again what he means and see how it goes. He is asking, is all that is pious of necessity just? Or is it the other way around? Are all elements of justice of necessity pious? Now, the nice thing about this situation is it is not only something that is important to Socrates and something was relevant to his time, it's relevant to our time. We can look at it as the same kind of question that gets asked actually in our country. In our country, this is a question that it's not asked in this way, of course, but it's asked by inference, or at least it's proposed by inference. And so these are two models, two different models of the relationship between, you might say, the relationship between church and state. That's really what this is. What role is justice and piety, religion and say the law? What balance should there be? And when something, when there's a conflict between the two, which one gets to be supreme? That's sort of the question that's being asked here. So let's look at these, because I'll give these names in the sense of sort of labels. This is something like the constitutional model of the relationship between religion and justice, or the religion and state. And this other one is what is always usually called the theocratic model. So let's look at them separately, because this is exactly what Socrates is asking. First of all, Socrates holds this view. It's the first one he proposed, but he said, well, or is it this way? Now, he holds this view. Generally speaking, Athens was this kind of a theocratic state. And part of the reason why Socrates is in trouble, part of the many sort of interlocking reasons that Socrates is in trouble, is that he holds this view, and Athens is this kind of a state. And of course, whenever Socrates holds a view, he doesn't hide it. He keeps it pretty much open and is talking about it all his life. That's sort of a part, but I'd say only a small part of his problems with the government. But let's look at these separately, see what it means. What this means is that pious, or let's say the practice and honoring of religion, is something that in a constitutional state must always be consistent with the justice, must always be consistent with the Constitution, must always be consistent with the law, so that when there is a conflict, when you, let's say, in the practice of your religion, believe you have to do something that's outside the law, that is forbidden by the law, this model says you can't do it. You can do anything you want to within your religion as long as it's consistent with the law, with the Constitution. But if you claim some special exemption from being law-abiding because of religious reasons, then we pull you to the curb. And that's this view, that the independence of religion is to be respected except when there's a conflict between what your religion tells you to do and what the law tells you you can or cannot do. When the law says you can't do it and your religion says you should do it, then you must follow the law. That's this particular view. That piety or religion is embedded in a larger context of a constitutional society, and that's how you understand, again, the conflict. In absence of conflict, as long as you're not doing anything against the law, what you do in your religion is entirely up to you. What you do in your relationship to your Creator is up to you. So that's what I call the constitutional model. It's in principle the model of our country and of a lot of the Western European countries, in which, first of all, there is typically a diversity of religions. And in fact, this is probably the diversity of religion model. In the absence of a dominant religion, that a diversity of religion says you can do anything you want to in your religion, but you can't. If your religion says we have to kill people on the altar, then I'm sorry, you can't do that because we have a law against killing people anywhere on altars or anywhere else. So that's the constitutional model. The theocratic model is the opposite. Wait, I got my damn pointer here. There we go. Color coded. So the theocratic model here, it's too bad there's not another classroom on the other side, because I'd really like to have known the other teachers playing. So anyway, just maybe somebody playing with a drink machine. In the theocratic model, justice is subservient to religion. And this only works if there is a dominant religious denomination, but essentially is what you're required to join. In our country, prior to the revolution, prior to the formation of the country as an entity, each of the colonies, not each of the colonies, but many of the colonies, most of the colonies, have what's called an established religion. In fact, the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment is essentially saying that, well, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. An establishment of religion in the colonies was that you are required to join. If you lived in that colony, you're required to join that church. You were required to attend. Usually they had a mandatory attendance. You were required to tithe. There were a whole lot of things that were required in all but 4 colonies, I'm happy to say. The colony where I was born and the colony where I lived most of my life. I was so old, it was a colony when I was born. Pennsylvania and New Jersey were 2 of the ones that had no established religion. The other 2 were Rhode Island and Delaware. Rhode Island was the first of the non-established of religion colonies, was often called by all the religious people around them Rogues Island, because the thought was, if you can't be compelled to go to church and join a religion, then you're surely an immoral piece of crap, and therefore you're a rogue. And so people are not going to be willingly moral or willingly religious, so we have to compel them to be religious. This is the view in the late 17th, early 18th century. The role of religion was to force people under the threat of hell and all those other kinds of, force people to be moral. But people aren't going to be religious any more than they're going to be moral unless they have threats. And so you're required in, again, 9 of the 13 colonies to join a particular church. You know, a different church for different colonies. You're in Virginia, you join the Anglican Church. If you're in Connecticut, you join the Catholic Church. And there's the Puritans up in Massachusetts and different things like that. So you sort of get the idea. So we had theocratic colonies, at least in those days, where, and the justice system and religious system went hand in hand. Essentially, the justice system was made up of religious laws, etc. When think of Iran today, it's the same sort of a situation where whatever the justice system dictates, it must be consistent with the dictates of the religion of that place. And so justice is subservient to religion. Or people in our country want this country to be a theocratic state. We're very much like Christianity to be the pious large circle, and that our laws be consistent with Christian doctrine, Christian religion, and things like that. And so this is a model which then offers no freedom of religion, actually offers no freedom of any ability to change the Constitution, except as it is consistent with the rules of the religion. So here are two possibilities, the constitutional and the theocratic. This is what Athens was like in the time of Socrates. This is what Socrates felt was a more enlightened way of doing it, and in part he's going to trial for that difference of opinion. But for the purposes of this dialogue, what we have now is the ability for Euthyphro finally to understand what the hell is going on. That's a refreshing thing, and quite a change over what has been. So Socrates repeats it there at about 12d. He says, this is the kind of thing I was asking before, where there is piety, there's also justice. But where there is justice, there is not always piety, for the pious is a part of justice. Should we say that, or do you think otherwise? No, but that seems to be right, says Euthyphro. So Euthyphro is buying into this, even though he's supposed to be a religious person. He probably would think about it twice and say, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be supporting this, aren't I? But he's buying into this, so let's let him do it, and we'll see what happens as we move on. And so what Socrates wants to know next is, okay, if the pious is a part of justice, what part is it? I mean, if we've got it located within a larger system of justice, then what part does the pious play in that? And Euthyphro comes up there at about E5. He says, I think Socrates, but the godly and the pious is the part of the justice concerned with the care of the gods. Well, that concern with the care of men is the remaining parts of justice. Remaining parts. Oh, hey, that's pretty good. And Socrates likes it in the sense that he's really sort of now become more specific. That within this area of justice, how you treat people, how you treat beings worthy of respect. God, or the gods in this case, is most worthy of respect. So there's a special area of justice, which they're calling piety, which concerns the correct treatment of the gods. But there's also the correct treatment of each other, and that's the remaining part of justice. We're all worthy of respect as well, and the law should make it so that we have certain kinds of rights and obligations, certain kinds of duties, certain kinds of prerogatives. And to respect them is to sort of go along with the system of justice. And so that part is here. But there also are different kinds of duties and obligations, prerogatives and rights that exist within here, and that's sort of what they're going to try to unpack. But what they've done is initially, and both Socrates and Euthyphro did sort of work on this together, they have initially said, okay, piety has to be a part of a larger picture of the right way to treat beings worthy of moral respect. And it's the part that has to do with the gods. And Socrates says, just a little before 13a, you seem to me to put that very well, but I still need a bit of information. Doesn't he always? I do not yet know what you mean by care. For you do not mean the care of the gods in the same sense as the care of other things. As, for example, we say, don't we, that not everyone knows how to care for horses, but the horse breeder does. Yes, I do mean it that way. Now stop here and note very carefully that Socrates was sort of leading the witness in the sense of saying, now, Euthyphro, you don't mean something stupid like this, do you? And Euthyphro says, yeah, I sure do. No, obviously, Socrates didn't say, you don't mean something stupid like this. But when he said, now you don't mean care in the same way we think about caring for horses, thinking that you'll say, oh, no, that's not a good idea. That's not appropriate for the relationship we have with the gods, to think of them in the same way the relationship we would have with a horse. Of course. And nobody worships a horse, of course, unless that horse. So the important thing is Euthyphro doesn't catch on to it, as I guess most of you haven't either. Of course. Go back to Nick at night when you get home. It'll work out a little better for us all. Because the only cultural references I can give you are from TV from back in the 1890s. So when I used to watch, with Gladiators Black and White. So let's continue on. And Euthyphro said, yeah, that's what I mean. And so he says, so horse breeding is the care of horses, yes. Nor does everyone know how to care for dogs, but the hunter does. That's so hunting is the care of dogs. The word care is really something that Socrates wants to make certain, because there can be more than one meaning of the word care, that they both mean it in the same way. There's a logical fallacy called equivocation, sort of a fallacy of language, where if you use a word that has more than one meaning in the same argument with different meanings, then you end up committing a fallacy, because we never know exactly what meaning the conclusion embodies and what the various premises did. So the same way, he is sort of saying there are more than one meaning for the word care. Let's make certain we understand the meaning that seems to apply to how we treat the gods. And I like to think we treat the gods different from the way we treat horses and dogs, and next will be cattle. And in all these cases, Euthyphro said, yeah, that's right, that's the way. And so Socrates apparently is going to have to show Euthyphro that this doesn't work. And this is the important thing. Socrates could have done it right away. He could have said, that's crazy, Euthyphro, don't you mean this and that? But the Socratic method is all about you discovering yourself as the person Socrates is talking to. If you don't discover yourself how you are wrong, then having somebody tell you you were wrong has much less effect than you discovering yourself that you were wrong. And that's what Socrates is always after. This is why sometimes these dialogues take a long time, and even when they don't take a long time, even the short ones can become mind-numbing and boring, because Socrates is unwilling to provide an answer, but is always wanting you, come on, understand this for yourself, figure this out, sort it through, you can do this. And that's what he's doing here with Euthyphro. He doesn't want to tell Euthyphro this is a bad meaning of the word care. He wants Euthyphro to discover it on his own. So it's going to take a little while, so that's why I brought cookies. You have something to nourish, and you don't have a cookie. I'm so sad. People who are on time got cookies. So on we go, but at least I'll tell you where we are. We're in Euthyphro. Okay, we're somewhere around, I don't know, 13b. Okay, how about 13b1 with the word yes? And cattle raising is the care of cattle, quite so. While piety and godliness is the care of the gods. Euthyphro, is that what you mean? I mean, he's hammering in here. Are you sure? We just went through horses, dogs, and cattle, now gods. Is there something wrong? Is this ingredient list somehow, which one is out of place? It's like me doing fuel, ignition, air, and cheesesteaks. Which one is out of place? Yes, Elian. You don't get one either. Cookie next. But go ahead. Elias, sorry.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm a little confused. So when Socrates is asking, like, so you mean the care of the gods, like the care of horses? So is he comparing Euthyphro's definition of care as to caring for horses? Or?
Yeah, he wants to know. Euthyphro, you mean care for the gods in the same way we think of a horse trainer cares for horses? And Euthyphro said, yeah, that's right.
So he's just trying to find a more specific definition of care in relation to the gods.
Yeah, and he wants Euthyphro to understand that this model of care, so to speak, has a lot of drawbacks. I mean, frankly, it's insulting to the gods to say that, yeah, we take care of you the same way we take care of horses, Jehovah or Zeus or whoever the hell it may be. And that's, but he wants Euthyphro to understand it himself. He wants Euthyphro to understand the problem rather than him have to tell him the problem. So it makes for a long class. That's why I keep telling you that. That short classes go home. Get a nice Bordeaux waiting for me. And so off we go. So we're so piety and God is the care of God, Euthyphro, that's what you mean. It is. Now in each case, here we have a little shift, Socrates attempting to point out again that if this is what you're saying, if this is what the model that you're going to use, then here is part of the, let's say, the logical implication of what this model of care means. Are you willing to accept? Socrates is more or less going to say, I can accept this model of care if you can accept the logical consequences of this model of care, and now let me tell you what they are. Let's sort of investigate together what the logical consequences of this particular concept of care, or this particular definition of the concept of care. It says, now in each case, it has the same effect. Care in each case has the same effect, and aimed at the good and benefit of the object cared for. As you can see, the horses cared for by horse breeders are benefited and made better. Do you think so? I do. So our dogs are benefited by horse breeding, cattle by cattle race, and so with all the others. So, or do you think that the care aims to harm the object of its care? By Zeus, no. It aims at the benefit of its care, of course. Is piety, then, which is the care of the gods, also to benefit the gods and make them better? Would you agree that when you do something pious, you make someone of the gods better? It's as if he's sort of emphasizing, this is what we do. We make the God better. Gods are supposed to be as close to perfect as we can imagine. Even in those days, that was the kind of perfection exemplified by the gods was something sort of untouchable by human capacities. And she says, you mean the little things that we do make the gods better? Finally, the dawn breaks. By Zeus, no, says Euthyphro. He realizes that it would be blasphemous to say that even the most devout person makes the gods better. And so this must then be the wrong model of care. If there's more than one model of care which essentially treats the object of your care as a client, poor baby, I'll make it better. Is that what you say to God? Poor baby, I'll take away the boo-boo. No. One would think, maybe you've got a different church you go to than one I'm familiar with, but it seems as if that's not exactly a correct relationship. And now Euthyphro realizes, no, it can't be that. Nor do I think that's what you mean, far from it. But that's why I asked you what you meant by the care of the gods, because I didn't believe you meant that kind of care. And up until this time, Euthyphro didn't know that either. So, fine. Quite right, Socrates, that's not the kind of care I mean. Very well, but kind of care to the gods would piety be? The kind of care, Socrates, that slaves take care of their masters. Understand? Of service to the gods. Well, Euthyphro got something right here in the sense that if you think about the relationship between the caregiver and the one cared for, horses, humans. Dogs, humans. Cattle, humans. Now, at least we reverse it. God's servants, God's slaves. There we are. Now we have a much different perspective where we are down here serving the wishes of the Almighty rather than we being something like the Almighty to the animals that are cared for by the horse trainer and the hunter and the cattle raiser. So finally we got a different model of care, a more model on the idea of service, serving someone or something better than you. So you can't think in terms necessarily of bettering something better than you. It's just, well, we'll see. Socrates says, well, in the case of service, we got something more to talk about here. He says, Socrates says there at a little before, you tell me to the achievement of what goal service to doctors tends? Is it not, you think, to achieving health? It is. What about service to shipbuilders here, right at E1? To what achievement is it directed? Clearly, Socrates, to the building of the ship. You can see here, Socrates is building up, you might call a it's often called a teleological argument, a goal-oriented argument, that a particular activity has a particular goal. Service. He said, when you serve someone, you are serving their ability to accomplish a particular goal. If you are serving the skill of a doctor, then you're helping the doctor engage in the promotion of health. Shipbuilder, building a ship. You know, cook, you're the sous chef, then you help the chef make some cookies or something like that. I don't have a sous chef, by the way, so that's why these cookies are so bad. It's a better sous chef than I would have. But I did make some really great red beans and rice this Sunday. Oh, man. Made the roux out of real chicken fat. Chicken fat. That's a roux that, you know. It's funny, I did that on the very day that I got an email from my brother who just had double bypass surgery. He's younger than me, but I eat chicken fat-based roux. I'm boasting here. So back to what kind of service would a sous chef be to a chef? How much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? Now, so what kind of service? What does our service to the gods help the gods accomplish? Or what can the gods accomplish that our service is important to? It's important that we serve the gods so they accomplish these ends. Now, you know, Euthyphro is having a difficult time explaining precisely what it is. It's easy to explain it with doctors. It's easy to explain it with shipbuilders or chefs or someone else. But the service to the gods, what do the gods, what do they actually do up there on Mount Olympus except sort of, you know, play grab ass and make up, you know, weird things for people to do down there? There must be something that the gods do that we, through our piety, the service we offer them, helps them accomplish. Where can we find out what it is that they do? And at this point, Euthyphro just sort of stonewalls. He just doesn't seem to really want to say anything more. And he is sort of just delaying. He's saying, well, I could tell you, but you know, it's far too complicated. So he's, Socrates is somewhat, I think you have to say somewhat, frustrated with this not working. If we go to, that's 14, got to 14 already, cool. If we go to, at about 14C4, there are a couple of things there. The first thing about 14C4 is, this one is at the last few lines of this speech by Socrates. The first part of it, I think, is wonderful. As it is, he's offering his frustration because he can't seem to get to the conclusion of the argument because Euthyphro is not providing anything useful. He says, as it is, the lover of inquiry must follow his beloved wherever it may lead him. Now, this is a point of view that Socrates stated quite often, Plato did, and throughout the history of philosophy, there is a tradition among philosophers of talking in terms of almost the erotic content of philosophy. I really believe it to be, I'm sold on it, but people who are not philosophers could not understand anything like the erotic concept. I mean, most people think there's a neurotic content to philosophy, but not erotic. And I think most philosophers, the people I talk to, whenever we talk with great intimacy about our profession, it inevitably comes down to almost a kind of a carnal love. I don't mean carnal in that way, you know, but a kind of emotional impact that philosophy has upon us. That is an erotic relationship we have with reason, with following reason, and being willing to shut out other things to follow this beautiful trail of reason to wherever it leads us. There is something, as I say, I think erotic is the only word for it. And there are a lot of philosophers who have made that point. The great Bob Solomon, who died far too young, American philosopher, taught at the University of Texas at Austin. He was an American philosopher. I think he got his doctorate at Oxford. A brilliant philosopher. He was one of the persons who spent the most time talking about this where he called philosophy is sort of the, what he called, I think, rational passion, where reason is sort of the, in some sense, the path you take, but passion is the attitude you bring with you on that path. And being committed to reason is like being committed to the most perfect object of love that you could ever have. The most perfect being is not perfect enough for a philosopher. Maybe that's why so many of us are divorced or single or never have a chance for anything other than. In fact, I was talking to my pal Grace outside, and she was at a party at the Midland, I guess, this weekend, and someone asked her, a young man asked her, what she was studying in school, and when she said philosophy, she said he literally took a step back with his eyes and then disappeared into the crowd. When you find a philosopher, that's exactly what as a philosopher, I know that, in fact, there is a philosopher, Simon Blackburn, a person I admire very much. I've read a lot of Simon's work. I actually taught one of his books once in an intro class, before I started doing these. And Simon Blackburn said, this is so bad for philosophers, and they go to parties where they're not known. And someone asked that horrible question, everyone asked, what do you do? That he learned, as I have learned, never to say you're a philosopher, because people just, their eyes will glaze over, and then they'll start darting around looking, who else can I talk to? My God, let me get out of here. It's like suddenly you're caught in this trap talking to a philosopher. Anything, show me an insurance salesman, please. Anything but a philosopher. And so what he ended up doing, Simon Blackburn, ended up saying to people, I'm a conceptual engineer. And really something good about that, because you dealing fundamentally in concepts, but engineering, I mean, that's what reason and logic helps you engineer concepts, helps you understand which concept will hold the weight, just like an engineer, says, civil engineer or mechanical engineer or electrical engineer, what structure holds the weight and what structure is going to collapse. And that's what we do. What concept will hold the weight and what concept won't. And so, if I were ever invited to parties, that's what I would do. I would say I'm a conceptual engineer, stealing it from Simon Blackburn, who is in England, he won't know. So, the whole idea of the erotic concept, or the erotic content, the erotic atmosphere within which philosophers work is not overplayed. I can promise you that. It's an extraordinary thing. I think, well, enough of that. Socrates is mentioning it there, that you follow your beloved. Your beloved is the argument. Your beloved is the rational search for understanding more deeply and more completely. And, it's hard not to love that. And maybe it's also hard to love anything else. So, on I go, confessing far more than I probably ever should have. So, I think it's another weakness of philosophers have. So, after that, he said, once more, what do you say that the piety and the pious are? Are they a knowledge of how to sacrifice and pray? So, Socrates is saying, is this part of it? Is this a part of what we get up here in this little circle? Knowledge of how to sacrifice and pray? They are. To sacrifice is to make a gift to the gods, whereas to pray is to beg from the gods. Definitely Socrates. Now, I take Socrates in that previous statement. He was doing the same thing he was doing about the idea of care being something like the care of horses, right? You don't mean that, do you? And unfortunately, Euthyphro did. I think he's throwing out the same sort of almost like a red herring, the same sort of a false lead, hoping that Euthyphro will think sharply enough to reject it. That's the problem. That's one of the great things that Socrates is trying to do. Offer preposterous proposals to see if Euthyphro backs away from them, saying, no, that doesn't make any sense. If Euthyphro backs away from them, that means he's been thinking about it, and he can offer some reason why it's no good. And that's a kind of a critical thought that's very useful in the Socratic method. But all Euthyphro seems to be saying is, yes, Socrates, why Zeus, Socrates, of course, Socrates, anything you say, Socrates. So, as a result, Socrates is having a difficult time actually getting something worthwhile from Euthyphro, because Euthyphro doesn't seem to be able to think critically. So he offers these little tidbits of what he thinks Euthyphro will say. No! You're saying that praying is begging from the gods? That's all there is to prayer? Begging from the gods? But Euthyphro says, yeah, that's right. Oh, okay, so he says, if you follow this statement, the piety would be a knowledge how to give to and beg from the gods. It's almost as if he's saying, this can't be right, Euthyphro. And Euthyphro said, you understood very well what I said, Socrates. So I think at this time, Socrates is hitting himself in the forehead and deciding that I guess we got to follow it because he's supposed to be the guy who knows something. But let's see if we can follow this path far enough that maybe, just as with before, with the whole idea of care of the gods, follow this path long enough, maybe Euthyphro will understand, oh no, this isn't what it is. Now we have to think about Euthyphro in two different ways as well. It may be that Euthyphro is overpowered and just is now lost. It may be that he is bored out of his skull and want to do anything but be here, just like or it could be that that Euthyphro is getting a little pissed off at this whole thing, is clamming up, is sort of shutting down. Well, I don't know which it is, but Euthyphro seems to be willing to sort of go along with almost anything. And so Socrates is going to give him a whole lot of line and see how far he's going to run with it before reeling him in, if that's exactly what happened. So we go back to D, that's about D3 or 4, yeah, about D4. That's because I'm desirous of your wisdom. I concentrate my mind on it so that no word of yours may fall to the ground. That might be ironic, I don't know. But tell me, what is this service to the gods? You say it's to beg from them and to give to them. I do. And to beg correctly would be asked of them the things that we need. Oh, well. And to give correctly is to give them what they need from us. For it not be skillful to bring gifts to anyone that are in no way needed. True Socrates. Now, I think one other thing Socrates is doing here, he's going over old ground. And this is something, giving the gods something they need is sort of like benefiting the gods, which is something that Euthyphro had a little while ago, a couple of pages ago, said, by Zeus, no, we can't make the gods better. But now Socrates is reintroducing it from a slightly different way. And I think it is to get Euthyphro to react again, saying, no, by Zeus, that's not what I mean. He's already done it once. But the question is, does he recognize this as essentially the same thing being proposed by Socrates? I really don't know myself. I wasn't there. So, but he is sort of saying, if the gods need something, that means that they are not perfect and can be made better, can be improved, can be benefited. And he says, and not to give, and to give correctly is to bring to them what they need from us. Well, if the gods need something, then they can be benefited, they can be improved, something that Euthyphro rejected a couple pages ago. So we'll see if Euthyphro catches on to this. True Socrates. Piety then would be a sort of a trading skill between gods and men. Sort of the swap meet on Mount Olympus. You go haggle with the gods for what you want, and the gods haggle with you what you go. Okay, a couple of dead cows, okay, and whatever it's going to be. And then you bargain back and forth, and eventually you both the gods, and you agree on what's the price of a good crop next year, shall we say. So trading skill, yes, trading, yes, if you prefer to call that. I prefer nothing unless it's true, but tell me what benefit do the gods derive from the gifts they receive from us? I mean, he is explicitly saying now the gods benefit, and getting Euthyphro to agree with him. Yet a while ago, Euthyphro said, no, we can't benefit the gods. I mean, we're just mortals, and that wouldn't happen. So, what they give to us is obvious to all. For there's no good that we do not receive from them. But how are they benefited by what they receive from us? Or do we have such an advantage over them in the trade that we receive all our blessings from them and they receive nothing from us? See, once you get into the trading metaphor that he's using, or the trading concept, then you realize it's give and take, and both sides want to get something. And both sides want to get something that they figure that's a good deal. So he is saying, we're getting a whole lot of good stuff from the gods. The gods give us everything. what do the gods get from us to make it worth their while? Or are we so smart? And the gods are such dim bulbs that I mean, it's like we're playing, you know, 3-card Monty, and the gods are saying, "Oh, again, I lost my money again." Are we that smart that we can really do the gods in that way? Or if not, then we have to understand, first of all, what the gods get that they need, want, and benefit from them. Or we have to give up maybe this trading analogy completely, which apparently Euthyphro had no intention to do yet. Or it could be that Euthyphro is on cruise control. That he's just sort of already saying, I'll read anything, I'll just say something stupid, and soon this horrible afternoon will be over. Okay, so if we go to, well, just a few lines down, what would those gifts of the gods be, Euthyphro? What else do you think? That honor, reverence, and what I just mentioned now, gratitude. The pious is that Euthyphro, pleasing to the gods, but not beneficial or dear to them. Oh, I think it is of all things most dear to them. So the pious is, once again, what is dear to the gods. Now, that's a definition, which we'll call it this definition. That was definition number 2. So what Socrates is saying, look at where we've come, all the way around, back to our old friend, the pious is what is dear to the gods. And then he said, well, I guess we got our work to do, don't we, Euthyphro? We haven't gotten very far, but hope you packed a lunch, pal. You know, let's get started again, that kind of. And frankly, at that point, at 15b4 or so, for all practical purposes, for all philosophical purposes, the dialogue is over. All there, Socrates is wanting to get started again. And Socrates has reason to think, well, if nothing else, we eliminated some things that didn't work very well. Maybe Euthyphro got to understand this causal reasoning a little better. Maybe we can go in deeper this time than we did before. But we've gotten back to something we discarded many pages ago, and suddenly it's what's dear to the gods is pious. Euthyphro, on the other hand, cannot wait to get the hell out of there. As again, I understand as I look at the faces, the faces that still have their eyes open at least, I can see that that desire to get the hell out of here is something that is not just a Greek desire, but it seems to be universal among people talking to philosophers. Grace will tell you, I will tell you, you can see it all yourselves, that that's the way it is. So the dialogue is over, and eventually Euthyphro makes these excuses and gets out of there, and Socrates says, come back, come back. Sort of a, why give up so easy? Now, I think I mentioned earlier that the dialogues that Plato wrote typically have one of 2 outcomes. Either they finally come to a conclusion about what they're looking for and what it is. That happens in Republic, and they understand the nature of justice through this construction of this ideal republic. So that worked out good. But the other version is they just never figured out. Euthyphro is one of those they never figured out type of dialogue, where it just sort of dribbles away into nothingness, and that was it. And so our enjoyment with Euthyphro has now dribbled away into nothingness. And remind you that the test is Wednesday. You can come in Friday if you want to. It'll be a lot of fun. I won't be here, but you can, that may make it even more fun. But the test will be Wednesday. Bring a Scantron card. Bring a number 2 pencil.
Bring a Scantron card?
Scantron card.
Where do you find one of those?
The bookstore.
Okay.
Scantron.
They're 25 cents.
What will be on
Scantron, the great robot of academia.
Is it this Wednesday? Or next Wednesday? This Wednesday?
This coming Wednesday. 2 days from today.
How many questions are on the test?
How many questions?
Oh, I think I've gotten it down to 32.
32.
32.
I thought you said
But each one more mind-numbing than the next.
There's a cheat sheet, right?
Huh?
There's a cheat sheet, right?
No cheat sheet.
No notes.
And actually, you do have to submit to a body search before coming in class.
So what is on the test?
What's on the test? There's lots of words in English, a few numbers. And,
Couple words in Greek?
the test is fundamentally about 2/3 questions of what I put on the board. Oh, look, there's stuff on the board. And about 1/3, mainly the questions and arguments and definitions from Euthyphro.
Okay.
Most of the stuff in Euthyphro is about the definitions, arguments, the weaknesses, strengths, that kind of stuff. And And then most of the, actually, I said about 2/3 of the questions are from the stuff I put on the board.
So on the last thing you said it's gonna be like on definitions, is it gonna ask, is this one of the definitions you the pro agree to, or is it gonna ask like, what's the fault of this definition?
Yeah, it'd be something like that, or is this a definition that Socrates agreed to, or what fault did Socrates find with this definition, something like that. I'll give you it's a multiple choice, so you, whatever it'll be, 4 choices of them. Doing multiple choice, I love doing matching sets, so you can be sure there'll be a couple of 3 matching sets. You know,
So if you get one
matching-
wrong, you're.
Huh?
Because if you get one wrong, you've got at least 2 wrong.
Well, then try not to get
Matching
one wrong. That's the cure. The cure for getting them all wrong is not to get one wrong. So that's what it'll be like. I'm assuming that the audios are going to be of very much use for you to sort of review what I said. But unfortunately, it's not a video, so you don't get to see what's on the board, so we'll get good notes of that. And other than that, that's what it's going to be. It's going to be mainly the stuff on the board, what we covered in youth row, and most importantly, when I'm covering the texts, you see we sort of leaped over a few things. If we leaped over them, then the test's going to leap over them too. I mean, there's no reason for me to leap over something and then they ask you 6 questions on what I leaped over. I mean, maybe some teachers would do that, but that is, what's the word, chicken shit? I use chicken fat, but I don't use chicken shit.
So what do you do? Only
You were a good man.
Huh?
You were a good man.
So any questions, any more? If you came in late, like Mr. Garcia,
I was within 5 minutes, I swear. 6:03. I mean,
I'm sorry, you were not within 20 yards of 5 minutes, yes.
I found 4 main, saying that it was while they present a specific